I was incredibly frustrated watching Warcraft. Released almost 10 years ago, the film received tons of criticism when it came out, leading it to flopping majorly in Western markets. I saw it in cinemas when it released, and I remember enjoying it, especially because I was someone who played World of Warcraft when he was 14. Revisiting it, however, was a disappointing experience, because there are sections of this movie that I thoroughly enjoy. Buried deep in it, there was something that could have been great, but it's majorly let down by the bulk of its story and characters being boring, frustrating, and most importantly of all, the visuals being one of the most egregious examples of live-action characters and VFX integration I've ever seen. Video game adaptations haven't had the easiest run of things over the years. There was the era in the 90s when those films didn't have a lot of story to adapt, and had to invent their own story while keeping some of the visuals tied to the games. Think the Super Mario movie, Street Fighter, or Mortal Kombat. As the technology for games developed, so did their capacity for storytelling, leading to some genuinely compelling narratives within gaming. Adaptations, however, didn't seem to catch up. All the way until very recently, there hadn't been a single good video game film or series. Fortunately, there's been a string of good adaptations in the past few years, with the Sonic films, the success of Mario, and for whatever people say about the Minecraft movie, I think it turned out about as good as it could have been. There are even some great adaptations in the television world, with Arcane and Cyberpunk Edgerunners. As someone who would love to direct a video game adaptation in the future, I think a lot of these products miss the mark by trying to adapt the game story directly into the medium of film, instead of taking what I think is the most important part of games, which is the world. While there is some genuinely compelling writing in games, moving their stories to film leaves out the most important part of how we interact with the characters within that world, and that's gameplay. Where game narratives become interesting is the intersection of gameplay and story. By taking out the gameplay, you're missing out on half of the narrative, and it's what I think can be the downfall of a lot of these adaptations. But one thing that will translate from game to film is the world the game takes place in. Edgerunners is the best modern example of this, taking place in the world of Cyberpunk and Night City while infusing it with its own original characters that aren't held down by the source material of the game. Yes, I know Cyberpunk was a board game first, but Edgerunners is a much closer adaptation of how the world is in Cyberpunk 2077 rather than the board game. Arcane gets to do the best of both worlds. It takes the world of Runeterra, along with taking the iconic characters and changing them for what suits the story. It isn't beholden to keeping any lore intact because the writers correctly binned the established lore for League of Legends when it suited their story. All of this is to say that Warcraft should have had the same advantages as Arcane. It should have its own unique story within the established world. It could introduce the factions and characters that they want to use in a way that's relevant to their own unique plot. What the Warcraft movie did could be described as the worst of both worlds. They chained themselves to retelling the original story of the first game, which is the first orc versus human war, then had to dilute the original characters and plot points just to make it fit within the film's runtime. The film opens by paying homage to Warcraft 3 with its introductory cinematic, as voiceover from Duratan, who should be our main character, is played. It sets up the core premise of the war between orcs and humans. It also introduces the Fel, which is an evil green magic that corrupted the orcs. After that, we meet all of our main players from the orc side, like Duratan, who's the leader of the Frostwolf tribe, Gul'dan, our evil shaman type, and Garona, a half-orc who is the only live-action person in this opening sequence. The blending of VFX is mostly okay here, but we'll revisit the topic. Gul'dan is opening a portal to Azeroth, and he's been doing that by being the most evil character I've ever fucking seen. He walks by just absorbing souls, and I love it. The portal gets opened, and the orcs flood Azeroth, and there we have the plot set up. I love this intro. Things, for the most part, look great. There's a lot of subtle detail in how the orcs look and feel. They're also expressive and filled with personality. Gul'dan being evil as hell is funny to me, but it also makes him an incredibly distinct character. I've gotten so much character from the small interaction between Duratan and his wife Draka as well, which happens in this opening, and it fills me with hope for the rest of the film. Unfortunately, my hope is near instantly crushed as we move over to Ironforge and are introduced to the Alliance, that being the humans and their side of the plot. God, the humans look out of place. I mean, just look at the dwarf, and look at the human character, who is Lothar, and he's been informed that a human garrison has been attacked. We find out that the Fel was involved in this attack, which is discovered by Khadgar, a guardian in training. They go to inform the king, who's married to Rosie from Love Hate. Anyway, the king informs them to summon the guardian, who is some sort of mage protector of the realm. They hop on a griffin and meet said guardian. This scene has the clearest dichotomy of the issues with VFX in this film. Inside the library, things look mostly great, and I think that's because there's a blend of practical and visual effects. I'm not some no VFX at all purist, and anybody that has that mindset for making modern film is either uninformed or has been tricked by marketing. There is a great 5-part video series called No CGI is really just invisible CGI, and that goes into depth about this idea. But my core takeaway was, for visual effects to look the best that they can, you should have live reference footage to base it off. In the case of Warcraft, the library looks good, and then as soon as they step outside, the quality drops massively, because it's just a pure blue screen environment. This isn't the fault of the VFX artists. The strain that's put onto them is incredible, and they're given very little time to work with. But regardless of whose fault it is, the end result is very visually unappealing. This is what I think is the biggest issue with the film: their ability to blend any of the human characters with the rest of the movie. Like for example in the following action scene, where a human scouting band gets ambushed by Duratan and his orcs. I'm instantly taken out anytime there's an interaction between an orc and a human. I think there were 2 routes for making the orcs blend with humans. You have our first option, which is just do makeup and hire a bunch of very burly men and stick them in heavy armor. I think the orc makeup for Garona, our human-orc hybrid, looks pretty decent, and it would certainly work for trying to translate the orcs into live action. Or secondly, and my preferred option, do this film like the live-action Lion King remake. I love the heaviness and the sense of scale that the orcs have, and when they're interacting just between themselves, it looks great. The issue arises when they interact with the humans, and it doesn't help that Warcraft's original art style was rather cartoony. Just look at the human's armor. It looks plasticky and doesn't have the same sense of weight that the orcs do. That look would work if it was the realistic animated style, much like those cinematic trailers for the game, but put into live action, it feels out of place. Maybe I'm a hindsight Harold here. That sort of film hadn't been done before when Warcraft released, and maybe it was too early for that to work. But considering those limitations, they should have had a priority on adapting it to live action. I'm not saying they had to be as extreme as the original X-Men.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
But at least try. Same goes for the magic and spell casting. Anytime there's a spell, I'm completely taken out. And I'm not really sure why they didn't try to emulate how all of this was executed in The Lord of the Rings, with how the spells are more subtle visually. Surely this was a similar audience that they were trying to capture. Speaking of capturing, the humans win the skirmish, with the orcs having the Fel sucked out of them, leading to the capture of Garona and another orc. How they transition between the 2 languages is cool, and generally that element is handled really well.
He does not know what you speak.
You speak our language?
And I will wear your tongue.
I'm just wondering, was it necessary? Like, what if they all just spoke English and nobody talked about it? Ah well, there's no need to bash on something that they did right. The orc is furious that Garona is talking, who can speak both orcish and human. He tries to stop her, but gets a sword in the neck for trying. Garona meets the king and is asked for her assistance against the horde, and once she does, she'll be set free. Flipping back to the orcs, we have this great scene where Blackhand, the orc who led the previous scene's assault, must be killed as it is their tradition for retreating. Duratan stops this by chopping off Blackhand's arm. The scene continues with Gul'dan insulting Duratan for being weak, and sets up that Duratan will challenge his place of authority later. Duratan then muses to his wife about his failure to be a leader today, while holding his baby.
He challenges you already.
I love how much is communicated about the tribal nature of the orcs' race in these 2 brief scenes. The magnetic voice work and all the small details on the orcs make them feel so alive and their scenes so enthralling. which is a major contrast with how boring and aloof the humans feel.
You'll take us to them, or you'll end up like your friend in the cage.
I'm not sure if it's casting, how the humans are written, or lack of direction, but they all come across like they're barely interested in being there. They all lack a personality with their stoic approach to delivery, and it comes across like they have no emotion. Lothar, Khadgar, the Guardian, and the King all deliver lines in the same way, and I honestly couldn't tell you what separates their characters. The King is the only one who makes an interesting choice near the end of the film. Otherwise, they feel static. Garona is the only one with a tiny bit of personality in her, and that must be the orc in her blood. She goes from being tribal, like an orc, to becoming more emotionally like a human. Well, emotionally in the sense of general humans, not like any of them in this movie. Durotan continues to grow wary of Gul'dan's influence and muses to Orgrim, a member of Durotan's clan, about displacing Gul'dan. They aren't strong enough on their own, but they could displace him with the help of the humans. This leads to them meeting all of the main players for the Alliance near Blackrock Mountain. Garona translates for them, and it seems to be all going well until there's an ambush from fell-infected orcs, surprising both sides. Fortunately, the Guardian was watching over the meeting to protect the Alliance, and he casts a very poor-looking lightning wall, protecting Lothar, but leaving his son to die. Prior to this scene, I was unaware that Lothar had a son. Not for lack of trying. The film does bring it up a few times. I'm just incredibly uninvested in Lothar as a character. And anytime he talks, I sorta check out. As it turns out, Orgrim betrayed Durotan, and even though he escaped from the ambush, Gul'dan orders the eradication of the Frostwolves because of Durotan's disloyalty. After this, we get a very cool scene of the orcs burning down the Frostwolf camp. Orgrim approaches Durotan's wife and lets her and her baby escape, as he was only doing what he thought was right. But Durotan's family doesn't need to suffer the consequences. During this time, Khadgar goes to the floating mage city of Dalaran, where he meets with an oracle-type figure called Elodie. She tells Khadgar that in order to defeat the bad guys,
always remember, from light comes darkness, and from darkness, light.
There's some incredibly vague yin-yang stuff that has no real root in the Warcraft lore. Maybe the writers were trying to connect the movie with the direction the games were going in, making the cosmology of Warcraft become more morally relative. But it's just not explained properly in the movie. It certainly makes absolutely no sense with the lore that was established in the games up until that point. And in the movie, there's no deeper meaning given to it. This film has a bad habit of setting up things and not giving the audience a payoff. The way this line is set up makes you think that it's a puzzle that will lead Khadgar at the end of the film to come to a realization that will help him overcome whatever threat that he's facing. Instead, Khadgar later in the film repeats this line verbatim and defeats the bad guy. At least it's better than a similar setup from the ambush scene.
Don't try and take them on with brute force. They're stronger. Be smarter.
I can't see what this is setting up, unless you count using a gun as fighting smarter. I suppose Indy would think so. Anyway, the film is building towards a climax. Durotan challenges Gul'dan to a fistfight to the death, which he can't refuse as it's orc tradition. It's a really sick fight scene, and it gives the orcs as a race a ton of character. Gul'dan starts using his magic during the fight, and the orcs start turning against him as it's disrespectful to their traditions. Some of the orcs decide to abandon Gul'dan, but because they're infused with the Fel, he is able to kill them on a whim. He uses this to scare the orcs back into line, even though he doesn't respect orc tradition. While all this is happening, we intercut between Lothar and Khadgar fighting the Guardian, as he's been possessed by the Fel. I've avoided talking about this until now, but who is the Guardian?
I felt the presence of the Fel.
I am the Guardian.
The film doesn't ever explain what he is, except that he is the Guardian. In the games, in return for helping the High Elves defeat the Trolls, the Elves taught the humans magic, leading to the formation of the Kingdom of Dalaran. However, the human mages use their powers recklessly, causing demons to be attracted to Azeroth. Because of this, the mages of Dalaran and the High Elves decided there should only be one particular mage invested with the powers of multiple mages, whose role it would be to actively seek out the fell influence in Azeroth and purge it. These mages would be known as the Guardians of Tirsfall. Before Medivh, who is our guardian in the film, his mother was the guardian. She wrestled with the avatar of Sargeras, who is the leader of the demon faction, the Burning Legion. Unfortunately, Sargeras covertly possessed her, and then that possession was passed on to Medivh when he was born, leading to him being corrupted in the future and inviting the Orcs into Azeroth. In the film, none of that is present, and the most we get is that he's some vague magical protector who battles with the Fel. My question is, why is he even in this movie? During the climax, there's a battle between Khadgar, Lothar, and Medivh. Medivh has been fully infected by the Fel, and summons a clay monster that Khadgar and Lothar have to contend with before heading to the final battle, and it's all just pointless and distracting from the war between the humans and the Orcs. Gul'dan works great as the main villain, and the humans having someone that controls the Fel doesn't serve any purpose to the plot. As I was talking about near the intro, the film is jailing itself to the events that happened in the game without any purpose to the narrative that they're trying to tell. The core essence of Warcraft the film is, can humans and orcs put aside their differences and work together to defeat a greater evil? I understand the intention. They wanted to have Medivh be a mirror to Gul'dan, so they both have a similar internal threat to deal with, but it dilutes their story. If you took Medivh out of the events of the film, nothing would be different. It's just a case of bloat. This film would have been far more effective with a core character conflict of Lothar, the King, Duratan, and Gul'dan, all representing different viewpoints on the issue of working together. This is kind of how it's executed in the film. Lothar is fearful of working with the Orcs, the King is enthusiastic, Duratan is backed into a corner and seeking outside help, and Gul'dan wants to destroy them. That's something you can work with, but it never has enough time devoted to it, because of all the other side plots swirling around this film. Medivh and the entire Guardian subplot with Khadgar doesn't add to this. Medivh's core character flaw is loneliness.
It's the loneliness that makes us weak.
Which leads him to succumbing to the Fel. We learn that previously he found a mate in an orc woman who went on to give birth to Garona, who he later abandons. Why he does this is something Garona actually asks him, and he simply dismisses her. The movie just fast forwards to him being eventually corrupted, and then he confesses this to Khadgar on his deathbed. While all of this technically makes sense, the movie does a piss poor job of explaining it, and I only caught on to what was going on after a rewatch with a team of Harvard analysts. They wanted to cram Medivh's storyline into the movie, while not having the time to expand upon the role of the Guardian and how this all happened. In fact, the entire point of Garona being his daughter isn't even made clear in the movie at all. It's something you hear from articles and videos talking about the movie on the internet. All of this is to say that Medivh's subplot about loneliness could be in service to the plot of the humans and the orcs working together, drawing a direct comparison on how his failure to connect with others led to his downfall, and if the main players of Warcraft fail to connect to defeat a greater threat, then they'll suffer the same fate as him. But Medivh's plot is 1, a deeply personal conflict that's more about love and responsibility, and 2, I had to interpret this by reading shamanic smoke signals about this movie. Before you even try to make this connection, you first have to resolve the fact that the humans and orcs have no external threat to unite against. The film doesn't include the background lore of the Guardian or the Burning Legion. The humans have absolutely no reason to care about the orcs. The Frostwolf Rebellion against Gul'dan is just a convenience, since the humans would much rather these things get the fuck off their planet as soon as possible. The whole idea of the humans and the orcs cooperating is something that they decided they wanted to incorporate from the games, but without the game's wider world building, the movie's storytelling suffers as a result. From the humans' perspective, it's not only Lothar who should be hostile towards the orcs, there's no reason any of the characters would care about peace, which may be why the humans feel so aloof. While the orcs get the breathing room to have their own narrative ecosystem, the humans have no characterization because they're used as a vessel to speedrun the human-orc pact. They didn't expand upon the Guardian, they didn't include the Burning Legion, and they didn't even give the humans their own place in the world. Combining all of those elements would have been a monumental task to get right, and they could have completely avoided it. This is a result of trying to cram the original game's story into the runtime of a film. They didn't need to do this. People came to this movie because of the world of Warcraft. Creating their own unique story and introducing established characters from factions in a tailored way to their own plot, so as they have the benefit of the rich lore of Warcraft without needing to use set-in-stone plot points from the games, would have been far less difficult than what they did for this film. The final battle commences, with the Human King charging in to free the prisoners, despite seeing the Frost Wolves crucified on the outskirts of the Orc camp. Throughout the final battle, when we're not seeing the humans being super big-brained, we're seeing Khadgar and Lothar teaming up to defeat Medivh. On his deathbed, Medivh directs a portal to the human capital, allowing the humans to send their prisoners home. But once he dies, the remaining humans are left stranded. The Human King convinces Garona to stab him in the back, as that will put her back in the good graces of the Orcs, and she's their only hope for achieving peace between Orcs and humans. Lothar arrives via a griffin to recover the king's body, but the Orc war chief captures him and compels him to another duel to the death. Lothar one-shots the war chief, but Gul'dan wants the Orcs to kill him anyway. In an admittedly cool moment, they disobey Gul'dan and let Lothar walk free as he won the battle fair and square. The penultimate scene is Lothar and the Human Queen uniting the Alliance following the king's sacrifice. We're then treated to Durotan's baby floating down the river as a setup for a sequel that never came. But you know what has arrived? My 5-part comedy crime miniseries called Midlands Mayhem. You can watch it right now for free on midlandsmayhem.com. Anyway, a Warcraft movie was announced all the way back in 2006, and it was going to be based on the original 1994 story even back then. Uwe Boll, the guy who made a few poorly rated video game movies in the 2000s, such as Far Cry, Alone in the Dark, and Blood Rain, originally wanted to be the director. According to the man, they told him they especially didn't want him involved. Sam Raimi was originally in line to direct, but Duncan Jones replaced him in 2013 before production started. The New York Times said that Jones had expressed displeasure with the script, saying it was too generic and that the humans were too much of the good guys, while the Orcs were just mindless savages. The movie tanked domestically, only achieving mass success in China, but even then it failed to break even by achieving the $450 million necessary when counting marketing and distribution costs. It grossed $439 million worldwide, and critics were generally negative towards it. But if audience scores are anything to go off of, the general public enjoy this film. Having said that, I remember when people were talking about this movie after it came out. People were mostly saying it was either average, bad, or just flat out disappointing. By now you can tell I fit into that third camp. I want to like this movie, I just can't. It's really disappointing, because there is some great stuff in here. All of the Orcs have so much personality, and when they aren't interacting with humans, it looks incredible. It's just a shame that the human side of this film is such a letdown. I recognize that adapting this story for the runtime of a feature film is a near impossible task. 40 minutes were apparently cut out of this, and while I can't say it would have made the film more enjoyable for me, it would have at least alleviated some of the rushed elements. It's unfortunate. Warcraft has such a cool world, and there's plenty of great stories you could tell in it. When I played World of Warcraft, what impressed me was the depth and breadth of that world. The locations, the exploration, and the history all drew me in. The film missed out on the potential of this IP. Hopefully we'll get an animated TV show down the line when everyone's ready to revisit the world of Warcraft.